Ulrich Roux, who is the founder and managing director of Ulrich Roux and Associates, joins us now via Zoom to break down what exactly medical parole entails. A very good evening to you, Ulrich. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the Globe.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me.
Now, Zuma's medical parole is not totally unprecedented, is it now? I mean, what's your reaction from a legal perspective?
Well, a lot of people have said to me that they are not surprised whatsoever, and this was planned from the outset since the day that he was arrested. But the fact of the matter is that our Correctional Services Act makes provision for a person to be released on parole, and there's also a Parole Act that governs the conditions under which a person can be released under parole. And it does seem as if Mr. Zuma now qualifies as a person who can be released on medical parole given his current medical situation. So I'm not surprised, but yes, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of dissatisfaction amongst the South African community because they would have wanted to see Jacob Zuma serve out his period of imprisonment of 15 months. It now seems as though he will not be serving that out in a prison, but rather in a medical facility, alternatively be receiving medical treatment at home.
Well, Zuma will complete his sentence in the system community corrections. What does this entail, Ulrich?
Well, remember that he still remains under the control of the Department of Correctional Services whilst he is under medical parole. He's by no means a free person. We have not had sight of the conditions attached to his medical parole, his release on medical parole, but what we do know is that he is still currently in a medical facility receiving treatment. He recently underwent a serious operation, and the reports that have been furnished to the Department of Correctional Services has confirmed that he's not a person who currently qualifies as someone who can be detained in a South African prison. In other words, he would not be able to function normally in a prison because of the fact that there's not adequate medical facilities there, and accordingly he needs to be detained somewhere where he can receive the medical treatment that he is entitled to in terms of our constitution. So, it's not a case of he's going home and, he's a free man who can enjoy social gatherings or going out to restaurants or family gatherings, etc. He is still very much a person who's will be controlled and monitored by the Department of Correctional Services, and there will be certain conditions. For instance, one of the conditions could be that he's only allowed to leave his home in order to receive medical treatment, that he's not allowed to receive visitors except for a certain limited period of time, etc., etc. But we will only know that 100% and have clarity on that once the conditions pertaining to his release on medical parole have been made public.
And the only thing we know so far is his medical condition, and no details have been given because the NPA and the defense and the prosecution still do not have the details of his medical condition because the letter that has been issued by the doctor did not provide such details. So is it perhaps a condition that the medical details, do get into detail as to what his medical condition is?
Yes, well, I think that it will have to become a matter of public interest and public knowledge, and that his medical condition will have to be disclosed. Remember that at the last appearance, when his matter was postponed until 9 September, the Judge Kuhn, hearing the matter, ordered that his doctors who are treating him are to furnish the NPA with a fully detailed medical report pertaining to his condition, and that the NPA is also entitled to appoint a private doctor to evaluate him and then to also furnish the court with such a report, and then the court will make an informed decision as to whether Jacob Zuma's fraud and corruption trial can proceed. So yes, at this point in time, it is not public knowledge as to what exactly his medical condition is, but it will have to become public knowledge on the next appearance when those medical reports are submitted to court, unless, of course, his legal team brings an application where they seek the medical reports and his medical conditions to be kept in a closed file and not to be disclosed to the public or in an open court. But the judge will have to evaluate such an application on its merits. So yes, a very good point. He's now a person that's qualified for medical parole, but no one actually knows what is wrong with him at this stage.
And given the fact that his medical condition is still pretty much shrouded in mystery, earlier this month, the KwaZulu-Natal High Court Judge, Piet Quinn, ordered that the state may grant a medical practitioner of its choice to sort of examine Mr. Zuma to assess his ability to stand trial for corruption, and for that doctor to be a witness if necessary. So what happens to that order then, Ulrich? Does it fall away, considering that Zuma refused to be assessed by a state medical practitioner and his own medical team recommended that he be granted medical parole?
No, that order is an order of the High Court. So if he refuses to be examined by a doctor appointed by the state, then he could very well be held in contempt of court. But that will depend, obviously, on his medical situation at the moment. All we know is that he is currently in some other medical facility and he's receiving treatment. Whether it has been possible for a privately appointed doctor by the NPA to evaluate him, we are not certain. But certainly his legal team will have to shed some light on that at the next appearance on the 9th of September. But the fact of the matter is that if a court order was made and that court order says that he must make himself available to be evaluated by a state-appointed doctor and he refuses to do so, then he could be held in contempt of court and could very well face another period of imprisonment if he does not purge that contempt. In other words, if he does not rectify that contempt. But we will have to wait and see what his legal team says at the next appearance.
And I suppose it'll get very, very complex here, because if the High Court order, for the state to appoint his own medical doctor to assess Mr. Zuma is indeed enforced, and Mr. Zuma is, eventually, for argument's sake, is eventually appointed, or rather assessed by a state medical doctor, and then the state medical doctor, finds that Zuma's medical condition does not warrant a medical parole. What does that mean? Does that mean he'll be, taken back to prison?
So there is a parole review board. The state could bring an application for his release on medical parole to be reviewed. And should there be sufficient evidence to show that he should not have qualified for medical parole, then that decision to release him on medical parole could very well be overturned. So yes, there is that possibility, and again, it is a good point made by you that the court still awaits the medical report from the privately appointed doctor, and very, you correctly point out that if that report contradicts the report submitted by Jacob Zuma's private doctors, then it could be a matter of not only the judge making a credibility finding on those reports and whether Jacob Zuma can stand a criminal trial, but also for the parole review board to reconsider those reports and to determine whether he in fact is a person who can be detained in prison to serve out a sentence, or whether he should be released on medical parole. So there is definitely still some developments that can take place in this matter.
And Zuma's lead doctor, Dr. Mcebisi said in court papers that the medical treatment he required, quote, cannot be delayed any further as it carries a significant risk to his life. While on the other hand, Advocate Wim Trengove for the NPA also argued that it will be in the interest of justice for the state to be able to have his own doctors examine Zuma. So would it appear that Mr. Zuma's right is being violated here, given the urgency of his medical situation, if of course Dr. Mtucha is to be believed?
Yes, it's certainly a strange scenario, because remember that Jacob Zuma's legal representative agreed for a state-appointed doctor to evaluate him. And then a few weeks later, they of course said that they are not going to allow that, and that Jacob Zuma's health and medical condition should not be scrutinized to such an extent. So very, very strange behavior. I mean, firstly, your lawyer agrees that you be evaluated, and secondly, you say, no, well, I'm going to refuse for that to happen. So that is the first difficulty that they are faced with. And the second one is, if he needs to receive urgent medical treatment now, surely the private doctor at the state appoints will confirm that. And that is the difficulty with Jacob Zuma refusing to be evaluated by a state-appointed doctor, is that if his medical condition really renders him unfit to stand a medical or criminal trial, and furthermore now unfit for a person to serve a period of imprisonment in a jail, that he must be released on medical parole, then surely any doctor would confirm it. And that is why it is so bizarre that Jacob Zuma now once again refuses to be evaluated by a private state-appointed doctor, because he should be taking the court into his confidence. He should be saying, I am very ill, this is my condition, this is the treatment that I require, and any doctor that evaluates me will confirm that. Once again, this is vintage Jacob Zuma, delaying every single court process that he's ever been involved in, and kicking the can so far down the road, frustrating the legal proceedings. And yet again, this criminal trial, where he's facing charges of fraud and corruption, has not even started yet. And it dates back to 1999, so 22 years ago, and we have still not started this trial.
Legally, who prescribes the conditions for parole, Ulrich?
It is the Department of Correctional Services. Okay. So they will determine the conditions under which his release on medical parole takes place. And if he is to infringe one of those conditions, then there could very well be an application by the Department of Correctional Services for his parole to be revoked. So very important that there is 100% clarity on those conditions, and that he knows exactly what will be required of him, and that he adheres to those conditions, because his parole could be revoked if he does infringe that.
All right, Ulrich Roux, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
That was Ulrich Roux. He's a founder and managing director of Ulrich Roux and Associates, joining us via Zoom to give us a breakdown of what medical parole for Jacob Zuma really means.